Hello, everybody. I'm back. This is Allie Leclerc, and I am joined by three panelists today. I am so excited for this panel and for the discussion I think we're going to have. By way of introduction, we have Anson from IBM, Kaushik from at Meta, and Shraddha from Intuit. And today, we're going to be talking about the future of data and data infrastructure and all the good things that are going on in each of these folks' companies. So, as we all know, AI is like taking over the world. Everybody's talking about how they're going to be designing their data infrastructure to support all these AI workloads and all the data that underneath. So, with that, why don't we just go ahead and do introductions? Shraddha, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Shraddha. I'm a senior staff at Intuit. I'm in the data processing team in the data platform. So I've worked extensively on Spark and Presto back in 2021, 2022. I worked closely with folks at Meta, and I'm also leading some of the Gen AI initiatives at Intuit.
Great. Looking forward to hearing more from you today. Kaushik, go ahead.
Hey guys, my name is Kaushik. I'm an engineering manager at Meta. I manage a couple of teams inside Presto. Been super involved in a bunch of the Prestissimo efforts and kind of like all of our close collaborations with Velox and IBM. And now also getting into kind of like some of our AI workloads and our Gen AI efforts here at the company. I've been at Meta for about 10 years, mostly kind of like in the database and query engine space during my time over here. Really glad to meet everyone here and looking forward to a wonderful PrestoCon day.
Amazing. Thank you, Kaushik. And finally, Anson, go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name's Anson Kokat. I'm a product manager for WatsonX.data. Been involved with the project for about since its inception, which has been about 2+ years, 2.5, 3 years now. I've been with IBM for 20+ years. Always kind of been a data person, data guy, working on DB2, Netezza, other technologies. Yeah, but happy today to be here with the panel and discuss data architecture.
Amazing. All right. So with that, Anson and folks, let's get started. I thought we could start maybe by having each one of you talk about just state of affairs today at your companies. What does your data platform look like? What key technologies are a part of that? And I think all of you have come prepared with a slide, which is amazing. So Shraddha, why don't you go ahead and you can just kick us off and show us what's going on at Intuit.
Yeah. Cool. Do you guys see my screen?
We do.
Cool. So this is a high-level overview of our data platform at Intuit. So what you see on the left is we have events and data coming in different formats. We have clickstream events, file, change data, capture events, and all of this events and data is ingested, curated, and materialized into a clean data lake. It is further processed. You run derivations, enrichment, feature engineering, and it's persisted back into a clean data lake. We are using Presto, Spark, and Flink for as processing. And our clean data lake is built on a truly open lakehouse architecture. We support both Delta. We have also Iceberg, and we have Uniform on top of that to make sure that reads and write are compatible. Our object store is on S3. We use Kafka for streaming. And all of this lakehouse metadata is persisted into what we call as data map registry. And from this rich metadata, you can drive, like different experiences like discovery, exploration, quality, and observability. And on the right, you see, sorry, going back. Yeah, and on the right, you see is all our analytics platforms. So we are doing analytics on Athena. We are also doing analytics on Databricks Notebook. We have BI tools, QuickSight, and Tableau. And then for AI, we are using SageMaker Studio, and also we are also using Databricks platform.
This is amazing. I'm loving all of that open source in that
And I
stack.
will just talk about high level it into a data landscape. We have 200K plus tables, petabytes of data into it. Was founded 30+ years back, so we have 30 years plus of historical data and 100 million plus customers. And I'm especially in the data processing team. So we have, variety of customers, engineers, scientists, machine learning engineers, variety of use cases that I talked about. And our platform supports, 200 plus users. We have 60,000, streaming and batch pipelines.
That's pretty incredible. So what is there a specific product at Intuit, or are you kind of across all these products?
So because we are in the
supporting regional?
central data platform team, so we support, small business, QuickBooks, Credit Karma, TurboTax,
Cool.
Mailchimp. So yeah.
Very good. This is fantastic. I mean, the reason I love this panel is that all three of you are coming at it from a different perspective here. And so here we have, B2C, like you're really supporting some of the applications that maybe many people in the audience today are using. So very cool. Thank you, Shraddha. Let's go to Kaushik.
Yes.
Before you start, let me share this.
Thank you.
Okay. Oop. There we go.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Ali. So I think, oh, wait a second. The box in the middle is missing.
Oh,
Ooh,
maybe because it's a build.
there we go. Okay, cool. Yes.
The most important box.
Exactly. Okay. And this is our overall architecture, highly simplified. But at a high level, not dissimilar from like kind of like what you'll see in a bunch of the big companies which have a lot of data processing. On the left, similar to kind of like what Shraddha said, we have a bunch of different sources which do a lot of the ingestion from various kind of things like maybe in user interactions. On top of that, we have a couple of boxes over here which talk about monitoring and observability and stream processing. These are systems which take data fresh off kind of like the stream to give us like alerts and monitoring and help us figure out when there are selves, and do a bunch of processing around kind of like some pipelines which require like kind of like this fresh data. A vast majority of data goes into our storage subsystems over there, and you'll see kind of like a bunch of these accompanying kind of like infrastructure things like resource and workload management for this vast warehouse over here. We store kind of like in the exabytes kind of like range of data. We have so in terms of data management, resource management, capacity management, these functions take care of things like security, quota management, load balancing, all of these kind of things which are required to make a warehouse work at scale. Um, right in the middle, like our favorite part, is with the compute engines. And we have two big compute engines at Meta. We have Presto and Spark, which do a vast amount of majority of kind of like the data processing that we have inside the company. And then we have, we're going to talk a little bit about the use cases. Ali, should we do that later or?
Let's do it now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
In terms of the use cases that, these compute engines and Presto power, there are a couple of ways that we think about it. Like the first segment, the first way that we segment it is kind of like interactive use cases and batch use cases. Interactive use cases are those use cases which are kind of where you have a user waiting at the other end of the terminal or a screen or a prompt or whatever, just to wait for those results. Ali, I think some of the arrows are missing over here.
Another build and see what comes up. Ah, there we go.
There we go. And so in terms of the analytics use cases, we have kind of like, yeah, so those are our interactive use cases. And then in terms of the batch use cases, these are very much larger pipelines, things which happen at some sort of recurring cadence. And then the other way to segment these use cases, which I think is relevant to kind of like the conversation over here, is that we have analytics, we have dashboards, AI ML is a really big use case, and then our experimentation platforms. In terms of analytics, we have a vast majority of the internal analytics happens using Presto. External, I think we're seeing an increasing use of external analytics kind of like being processed through Presto. Dashboards, again, like most of the dashboards inside the company run using these compute engines like Presto. Experimentation platforms. This is another big use case inside the company. So these are most big companies. We do a lot of A/B testing for our features, our ads, things like that. And so these products are platforms in their own right. They have their own customers and things like that. And so this is a big one. AI ML, super interesting, and probably a bunch of the focus for today's conversation. It's already kind of like the largest users of our warehouse, quickly growing, fastest growing segment over here. And in this, we have like a couple of different things. We have like the ML jobs, which process for the feed ranking, ads ranking, those kind of things. And then we also have pipelines which target kind of like this whole Gen AI world, which is yeah, around Llama and those kind of things. But yeah, cool. That's a little bit of
So question on, I think it sounds like you're a bit of like a combination of both building out these platforms for your internal users, but also some of those, like I think you mentioned the experimentation platforms are also serving end users as well from like a customer perspective. Is that right? Or is
so
it mostly just internal?
most of the experimentation platform stuff is internal.
Got it.
But under the analytics umbrella, like you notice this external one, these are more external. And so these show users some kind of like stuff about how their ad campaigns are doing and things like that. This is a growing segment, but again, this is a little bit of a new space that Presto is getting into,
Very cool. Well, I'm excited to dig more into the AI ML later on.
certainly.
Great. Okay. And Anson, let's hear from your perspective how IBM is thinking about all of these things as they're building out their platform.
Sure. So let me bring up my architecture slide. I mean, think of this as kind of a pre-built data and AI platform specifically for Gen AI, right? We call it like this is a Gen AI ready data lakehouse. That's kind of how we describe it in marketing terms, I guess. But if you look at it from a technical point of view, we are kind of embracing a lot of open source components. I would say it's not just focusing on Presto alone. We also support Spark and now the new Project Gluten, Milvis. We just closed our acquisition of DataStax, which is a different data company altogether, right? So we're integrating that engine into our stack now as well. But all of these engines are meant to be, you pick the right engine for the right workload. And then, it's acting on the data sitting in object storage, right? So it could be IBM object storage, it could be AWS S3. You decide kind of where you want your data to be, and then these engines are kind of acting on top of that. We also have like even from a metadata perspective, we are supporting open source components here as well, right? But the idea is to kind of integrate all these open source components, have the integrated data fabric, which is all around data governance, data quality, data lineage, because a lot of people, they start with Gen AI, then they start to get into the data architecture, but they don't think about data quality until the very end. And I think sometimes, you get stuck at that when you're going into production and things start to go wrong. You want to think about data quality from day one, right? So we've kind of got this data fabric type capability built into this stack as well, so that you're dealing with all the data quality, data lineage, data governance from day one. But yeah, this is kind of the architecture that we have in play. Like I said, it's kind of like a Gen AI pre-built data lakehouse ready to take on the modern world of Gen AI.
Very cool. So let's say I want to talk about this next question. And so let's stay on this since you have this up, because I think from your perspective, this is interesting. You have customers that are coming and like you're B2B, right? And so you have other businesses coming and leveraging this platform to build their own apps. So as IBM kind of thought about how they built this, what were kind of the approaches that you took, that your team took around scale and performance and the trade-offs that you have to make, to make sure your customers are happy and getting what they need?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of scale, I think, some of the customers we deal with are pretty large banks, pretty large customers. So we are scaling to those customer needs. I think just we have to, right? Because that's what the customers demand. And we definitely have to make sure that we're scaling those. So it's making sure that we're doing the testing ahead of time, making sure all these open source components work together at that scale, right? Making sure that, just not just looking at Presto engine by itself, but other engines, other metadata catalogs that we're integrating with, it needs to absolutely perform at the scale that our customers require. I think some of the downsides to that is sometimes, people come in expecting like data warehouse type performance, and sometimes we're not there yet with some of the stuff. I mean, we're getting close with some of the Presto C++ and some of the new things, but sometimes what they had before from a data warehouse perspective, they're working now moving into this new data lakehouse perspective. Things are different in that world, right? And I think there are ways around it. I mean, a lot of customers don't need the highest performance for all their workloads. So I think it's good sometimes to segment your data sometimes into gold, bronze, silver type of medallion architecture. I think that helps sometimes to get around some of those performance things that you're dealing with, right? And just being able to deal with that at an enterprise scale.
For sure. So that's interesting. So I love that perspective. So Shraddha, let's talk about how you're thinking about building your platform. I think you're solving for maybe a little bit of different problems, right, than Anson. You're solving for your internal users and what they need, right? And you've pieced together a ton of open source tech. So how is that all working in terms of performance and scale?
Yeah, so as I said right in the slide that we have also done, we have 30 years history of data, and we have acquisitions also and migrations of Credit Karma, MailChimp. So we have large complex data, and data can become messy. So we have adopted a few strategies so that we unlock true potential of data for our customers, and scale our platform. So first one is, and Anson kind of highlighted into it. So first is our data mesh strategy. So data mesh is particularly suited for companies, dealing with complex data, who want to organize data and derive value out of it. And the core of data mesh is data product. So data product is an smallest unit of architecture that can be independently deployed and has all the structure so that it can operate on its own, like code, data, metadata, infrastructure. And so the idea behind this is that, data is treated as products, and there are teams managing the data product that generates business. So now the ownership is not on the central team, but the ownership shifts on, the data teams which are managing it, or the business teams which are managing it. And all of the data products that we are building at Intuit are scored against some standards, clean data maturity standards that we called, and that has specifics on data quality, observability, operational readiness, lineage, document stewardship, and all that. So that ensures that the data that you produce has trust. It automatically increases your data consumability. And then the second thing that we are also investing heavily is because, we have this vast varied data. You have consumer data, you have tax data, and all this, complex compliances. So we are heavily also investing into access controls if we want to make sure that, our data, we can grant or deny access at row level, attributes level. And in order to perform at scale, right, with all this, different products, in order to build better customer experiences, what we are doing is we are unifying our internal data capabilities so that it works across, multiple products. We are also building a uniform semantic model, and building a semantic model is hard, that, spans across all of this, Credit Karma, QuickBooks, and other products, so that we can deliver this, complete, relevant, and trusted experiences to our customers. Now, the other thing that also we are doubling down is lineage. We want this comprehensive view across all of your products, and the lineage should comprise right from the source databases to models, and it also should have pipeline information. So once you have all of this connected graph together, you can easily, debug and, monitor issues and all. And all of this is based on, our open house, architecture, which is, which are already backed by S3, Iceberg, Delta. So these are the few strategies that we have adopted in order to scale our platform to, to our consumers.
Amazing. What I'm gathering is it's complex. There is a lot to manage. There's a lot to think about, and it's starting at day one, right? Making sure you're architecting for future-proof changes, right, in the industry and in these types of architectures. So super interesting. I know you highlighted security quite a bit, and so I'd imagine this is something that many people are thinking about as they're sharing data across the org.
Yeah.
Some of it
And
might
I'll
be.
just like to add, right? Like
Yeah,
sorting technology is actually not that hard, but when you have this complex data, you need to
right.
have strategies, right? So that it works well for our
That's
customers
right.
and
That's
efficiently.
right. That's right. Great. Kaushik, let's talk about how you think about it at Meta in terms Meta is one of the biggest hyperscalers on the planet, right? And so you have a very, I think, unique perspective in that. So how do you think about it as you build out your data platform?
I think a lot of what Shraddha and Anson said like really do resonate. It's enormously complex. We have so many kind of like interdependent systems, and like each of these things, they have so many ramifications across the board that I think like it takes a lot of teams to come together to move some of these big things. In terms of kind of the scale and performance trade-offs that we have, it's super hard. There's no one size fits all. I think what Anson was saying, kind of like gradiating these workloads into having different expectations, gold, bronze things. We have very similar things kind of like inside the company too. And I think the way that we also deal with it is that we have different solutions for these different requirements. And like we have like sometimes there are these use cases which require super low latency, something in the hundreds of milliseconds. But then you have these much larger workloads, which are typically running like in the hours or sometimes even in the days. And for them, 100 milliseconds isn't going to change anything. They care a lot about scale and efficiency and things like that. And so we have like each of the engines and have these different strengths. Things like we have some engines which run kind of like we have Presto running like in a single box, super quick, super fast. And then we start running, we have deployments which are shared. This gives you like a bunch of benefits, very fast, kind of like latency, things like that. Then we start having like dedicated deployments for a bunch of our use cases, people who need more consistent behavior, things like that. And then we start even getting to like these scaled, super hyper scaled workload execution for the very large executions. One of the things I think is that like our developers definitely like having some consistency as they move between these different modes of execution, between these different deployment models, if you may. And so I think that's something that we're focusing on, especially with a lot of our focus on Gen AI workloads and the way they're pushing our stack. There's this interesting need to kind of like get a lot of the benefits from each of uh, these different layers of the stack and put them all together. And so it's a very cool challenge that we're trying to take on.
I like what you said, consistency. Consistency is key. I think, making sure that you're providing that experience across the board,
Yeah.
hard to solve for, but if you can do it, it makes everyone's life so much easier, right?
Yes. Trust.
Okay, so one question I have to throw out. I think our attendees love to hear these sorts of things. War stories, lessons learned, right? All three of you are building like big platforms for big scale. What's something you've learned along the way? Maybe something that didn't go the way you thought. I call them war stories. Anybody want to start with something that's happened over the course of your data platform life? Anybody have a good one? Anson, anything? Kaushik? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Anson, go ahead. I think you were saying something.
No, I mean, yeah, I think going back to that performance kind of perspective, right? Sometimes we go in trying to replace maybe existing data warehouses, thinking that the performance is going to be exactly the same, and realizing that it's not, right? And I think
Yeah.
we have to set expectations in a data lakehouse world that you know performance is relative, right? I think depending on the workload, depending on what you're trying to do, you might get different performance characteristics. And I think
But the trade-offs are worth it.
the trade-offs are
Yes.
definitely worth it, right? I think the usability,
Yes.
the reliability of what you're getting, the use of object storage, which they could not use before, you're saving tons of money, and you start to realize that performance wise, I didn't need that highest performance for all those transactions, right? And I could live with, these reports only go out once a month. It's okay to have slower performance on some of these workloads. So, that's some of the war stories that I've seen. I
Yeah.
think
So some hard conversations to be had
Yeah.
until they can see the light.
until you see the light. But
Yeah.
I think we've we were successful in kind of getting over that, kind of setting expectations, right?
Yeah,
Just making sure that we could, that this is a different world. I think that we're
right.
doing.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, really, really, in terms of like lessons learned, I think one of the biggest things that we think inside the company, we're an infra team, right? Reliability is just so, so, so important. And it's something that goes underappreciated until actually these wars break out. And it's super crazy. Like, I think like within the company, I think you'll hear us saying things like, reliability is table stakes, reliability is the job. And it's a P minus one. It's not even a P zero, it's a P minus one. We just need to get. And it really is. It's one of those things that, which if you just don't get right, nothing else matters. Like none of this AI stuff, nothing is going to work on an unreliable stack. And so I think we've really, really learned that, like, fixing stuff now, like every little bit that you fix now is one less issue that we're going to like fix later. And so this is definitely one of the big things that we've learned over the years.
Consistency and reliability. I'm taking notes, Kaushik. Sharon, anything else to add on that
I
front?
think it's just, as I said, that, like adding to what Kaushik and Ansa said, right? Yeah, our data mesh journey started because of this, right? That we want to treat data as products and, we continuously evaluate, like what Kaushik was saying, a lot of emphasis on quality and reliability because, if your data is not good, actually data is the hardest problem. Getting data in a usable format. If your data is not good, if it's not in a consumable, usable format with high quality reliability, then you cannot build AI experiences on that. So
That's what I think too. I've been saying that. Data is the most important
data
part.
is the
Without
hard
data,
part.
the AI stuff
Hard.
just will not work. Yes. Okay. All right, good. So I love these stories. Let's talk about open source. We are at Presto Conde. Presto, of course, is an open source project, part of Linux Foundation. So we strongly believe in open source and the goodness that open tech can bring. I think all three of you, when you shared your data platforms, showed different open source technologies, open formats, whatever it was. So maybe each of you can talk a little bit about your take on open source, why it's important, pros and cons, open source versus proprietary. And Shraddha, let's start with you because I think you had a little bit of a mix. You had a bunch of open source. You also had some proprietary stuff in there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of open source and I'm also an open source contributor. I've contributed to Presto,
Woohoo!
Spark is Connector, Calcite. So I love open source. So I think open source, the biggest advantage you get is, there's no vendor lock-in. There's no license fee. It's actually good to also learn and get your hands on. And, if you need some features, you don't really need to depend upon a vendor. You can contribute to it or, you can find, if the community is active, you can find other developers to contribute. So that's all, the pros of it. I think the cons is, again, there is a learning curve involved. You need to spend and invest that time. And, that support, I think, if it's a proprietary product, then you get that enterprise level support. So that's what, are some of the cons.
Right. Anson, let's talk about from a vendor perspective,
Yeah.
including open source and the platform and what the thought is
So
behind that.
So from a product perspective, right, being a product manager, I mean, open source just gives us like leaps and bounds advantages of developing a product, right? Because we can rely on a community to get stuff done. It's not a fixed set of developers that, has to work on a specific components. We get a whole community behind this, right? And they're all behind, making the project work. I think that's the advantage of using open source in an actual product. You just get tons of productivity in terms of just being able to deliver features at breakneck speed, right? You have a whole community behind that. So I think absolutely we embed tons of open source in our product in watsonx.data. Specifically, we use open source, but we also contribute back to the community as well, right? We are we are dealing at enterprise type scale. So we are contributing that back to the community because it helps the product evolve as a whole, right? Some of the cons, I think, like Shraddha said, there is, you have to rely on open source, but I think when you're in like a corporation that has to support open source, typically, the corporation will deliver stuff at, if there's a fix that's needed in 24 hours, we deliver that fix, and then we contribute that back to open source community as well, right? So I think sometimes if you try to go it alone with open source, it can be difficult to rely on a community for things that are enterprise scale, right? And enterprise speed, and you need that support for the enterprise. That can be difficult from an open source perspective. I think, some things open source community, could be better at is like security vulnerabilities. I find sometimes is hard to deal with, right? It's not really a top of the list type of thing from an open source perspective. I think people try to get features out, which is great. I mean, we get new features, exhilarating kind of capabilities in the product, but sometimes the nuts and bolts of, security vulnerabilities and dealing with all those need to get addressed as well. So I think we spend a lot of time at IBM anyways, dealing with those security vulnerabilities, making sure it's kind of enterprise grade. But, open source overall, I mean, IBM absolutely, uses it in a lot of products, but we also try to give back. We're big contributors in the open source space as well. Presto, Spark, Gluten, we're big attributors into these projects, and try to help the community grow as well as using it for our own product space as well.
Yeah, and I think it's IBM and their relationship with open source is a really good example of how to do open source in the right way, right? Not just being an end user, an end consumer, you're contributing a lot back into the project and making it better, and partnering with all the other contributors to the project. And so I've enjoyed watching that grow, and it's a really good testament to the ethos at IBM, and also a really good example of how IBM or how open source can be done in the right way. So thanks for that perspective, Anson. Kaushik, how about you? Open source. I know Meta is very big into open source, but what's your kind of perspective on all of these projects and ethos around open source?
Open source is a big deal. I think in a positive way for the company. And like you said, similarly for IBM, I think there's this really good feeling about giving back to the community. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of like inside the company hold near and dear to their hearts. And one of the big pros is, especially like if you work on any of these open source projects, recruiting is so much easier. People just love doing that. I mean, it's just part of us, right? And so I think that's pretty cool. But just like more tangibly, like working with open source, working with our partners in IBM and Intuit and Uber and all of these companies, they do give us kind of like a leg up, especially like, for example, if you think about some of the more recent work with, Prestissimo, Vlogs. These are all huge open source, projects. We have so many contributions, more than half, like just from outside the company, and that you just have to double the team internally if you want to do all of that. And so, like these are platforms that are shared, and I think it's been kind of like really positive internally. Not to say there aren't cons. There are plenty of cons. I mean, like more like developers, you're trying to check in code, you have to merge something from somewhere else, and then something breaks, and it's things thing. But there's the saying, right? Like, what was that? If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think
Yeah.
this is really one of those things where that really does resonate.
Yeah. And I think it's been so fantastic, watching there so many open source projects are born at Meta, right? Because Meta is building like for the future, like they're the hyperscaler, right? You're seeing problems before anybody else is seeing them, and you're figuring out the solutions to those problems before it hits the rest of the market. And so kind of watching the innovation coming out of Meta and then how you're building, I think you're really leading this whole, data platform, how you architect for the future as you are already in the future, in my opinion. And so partnering with Meta and kind of understanding, the workloads and how to build for those workloads has been really great. And I think it's great for the Presto project. You mentioned VLOX, there's a bunch of others, but it's been fantastic to be on this journey with Meta. And so always great to hear your opinions and where the technology is headed.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're here to talk about AI. I think we are all in this like world of AI. Everything is AI, Gen AI. How do we build to support that, right? And so, Kaushik, let's start with you. As this rise of LLMs and Gen AI, I think changes. It feels like almost every day. How do you plan? How do you store that data? How do you optimize it? How do you query it? How do you think about it on your team?
Oh, I don't know. I like it's changing a lot, like across so many different axes and so many different dimensions. I mean, it's not going to be possible to talk about all of them. But like, what do we do? We're a data platform. We help kind of like engineers inside the company extract value from data. And I think one of the interesting trends that we're seeing is that folks who work on some of these kind of like Gen AI training or feature injection or these kind of things, they have a different development methodology than some of the, prior approaches that we were taking. There's a lot more iteration. And so, for example, we'll see our engineers kind of like experiment with all kinds of different things, different kinds of libraries, different scale, different functions to filter, clean the data, and all of these things. And you're experimenting, hundreds of times before you find something that works for a model or something, and then you land it. This ratio of development is very different from what we had before. And so we're seeing like an increasing need for providing really strong support for these kind of like DevX experiences. The engineers, the scientists who are working on this, they need scale because you're working on enormously huge data sets. You need latency far more than you needed it before because you're experimenting so much. And it's interesting because they're asking for this whole breadth of kind of like the whole breadth of the spectrum from these engines all in one. It's pushing our engines to the extreme on both kind of like speed and scale. So it's a super exciting time to be part of this. The other thing, definitely like another axis that we're seeing like all of this LLMs change things is around using natural language to query data. For the longest time, we've been using SQL, but you don't need to anymore. And so like you see like a bunch of tools where you can just go in and put in some like, hey, give me how many users are using this or whatever, and it'll generate the SQL, it'll get you the results and create dashboards, widgets, and things for you. And so lots of changes. It's an interesting time to kind of like be in this.
For sure. Shraddha, interested to hear your perspective on this as you're building, I think, what seems to be a lot of agents, building on top of LLMs internally. How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I think plus one to what Kaushik said, right? I think it's the same problem that, Intuit also has. So in terms of storage, investing like double down on, lakehouse architecture. And then also we are evaluating, Databricks Mosaic AI platform. We're also doing evaluations with AWS SageMaker. And internally, we have developed a platform which we call it as, GenOS, which is a paved path for developing Gen AI models, Gen AI use cases. So it has, developer toolkit, which, abstracts away all these intricacies from developers, the infrastructure, the ML ops, prompt management, prompt tracing. It provides out-of-box observability, in terms of, monitoring the cost, performance, and it also, in terms of also security and safety, it injects, the security and safety checks during runtime so that, all our requests and response are in compliance. And what we within the data platform are investing into what we call as the semantic building the semantic layer. So now you have all this technology, you have all this platform, and you have all this data, right? And you have raw data, but LLM works well when you provide that rich business context, right? So we are building and we are usually investing into building that semantic layer which sits on top of raw data and end users, and it's a business friendly representation of data, and it has matrices, dimensions, rich metadata, tribal knowledge. So once you have that good semantic layer defined, right, you can easily build AI applications on top of that. So we are also doubling down on that. And as Kaushik said, right, now the earlier you can call an API or your experiences will be through UI. Now that is changing through, natural language and, agents. So that's one big shift.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it. Anson, I know IBM recently announced the Gen AI Lakehouse. What does that mean? And tell us more about how IBM thinks about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a data perspective, like I ask this question to customers all the time, like, is your data, do you honestly think your data is ready for Gen AI? And a lot of people cannot even answer what that even means, right? They have no clue what it means to get your data ready for Gen AI. So that's kind of what we've built around Gen AI Lakehouse is just having your data ready, prepared. I think Shraddha and Kaushik are talking about quality of the data, the semantic layer, all these things that you think about. Those are all absolutely attributed to building a Gen AI lakehouse, right? But how do you, what are the tools that you use? How do you get ready for that? That's what I think about from a product perspective, is how can we build those tools to kind of help you get that data Gen AI ready. Some of the new stuff as well, we're starting to see a trend around unstructured data, which is like, think about data sitting in PDF documents, and, it could be like scraping, it could be user manuals, but there's tons of valuable data in there that you can use with Gen AI as well, right? So, some of the new stuff that we're trying to do is trying to um, capture that unstructured data and contribute that towards creating, a Gen AI application talking to your data, right? Where you can, I think there's a statistic that 90% of like valuable enterprise data is in this unstructured data format, right? And so just being able to capture some of that, being able to use that in these Gen AI applications, there's tons of value there as well. So we're trying to build on top of that. I mean, just, getting your data ready for Gen AI, but then, as well, we want to, we have a bunch of Gen AI features for customers as well that are using products, right? In the Gen AI space, we utilize Gen AI ourselves underneath the covers to build stuff like data quality. Some of those classifications can automatically be done for you by Gen AI. So, using Gen AI in the product to help the customer, but also helping the customer get ready for their Gen AI data, right? For getting their data ready for Gen AI. That's also a very important part of this.
Makes sense. And it sounds like unstructured data is a big piece of that for many of the customers.
Yeah, it's kind of like a hidden gem that a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize, but there's tons of valuable information in your organization that's
Yeah.
sitting in these, invoices, contracts, all this stuff that you could glean and just get valuable information from. Absolutely.
Makes sense. So as we kind of look ahead, as you and your teams look ahead, as you're designing and building these future platforms for AI, what are the things that are like changing from an architectural perspective? Are you shifting anything in terms of your data prep, your retrieval, how you serve the data? Shraddha, I'll start with you. How are things like how does your perspective or how you think about building change? Has it changed?
Yeah, so I mean, I just highlighting on, again, what I said before is, there are tons of AI, use cases that we want to build and, span across, all of our products. So like we are doubling down on, this GenOS framework, and I'm personally working within data capabilities to build, this reusable tools and agents framework. And we have so many use cases, right, around the company. And then we'll try to look, there are a lot of common parts where, each of one can you share and reuse. So we are building on, this reusable tools and agents framework so that, the agent that I have built for, say, data quality can be used in some other applications. And in terms of, preparing data, I said that, the semantic layer, it plays a very huge role, right? We have seen that, we have built applications, and if you don't have a good semantic layer, they don't perform well. With respect to data preparation, because with LLM, right, you have to provide more context. So we are seeing more evolution of metadata and, knowledge graphs, rich context. We are seeing rise of, vector databases where, all your embeddings are stored. And yeah, then we are seeing that shift from, our UI based application to agents.
Makes sense. Kaushik, how about you?
Um, I think just kind of like thinking ahead, like what is it gonna mean to be an AI first stack is something that we're trying to grapple with. And this means like we've gotten really good at kind of like these traditional use cases, things around analytics, experimentation, things like that. But for our AI use cases, I think we're still a little bit early in understanding what this is because the entire space is moving so fast. There are no standards yet, and we're in the process along with the rest of the industry to figure out kind of like how we're going to go about about doing this. And I think one thing that we talk about internally inside the company is just kind of like how we approach these problems. Right now, I think where we are in the journey is like we don't have like these vastly generalizable solutions because every day, every week, every month, these things are changing so much, and it's our job right now to kind of like meet the customers where they are and go with them, talk very deeply with them, understand their pain points, figure out how can we solve these problems, maybe or maybe not. They don't exist in the existing platforms that we have today. And then we do this, and then slowly with time, we'll be able to identify these patterns across various use cases, start bringing them back, build these platforms which can support a vast number of these. And There's a lot of stuff that we have to do in the stack. Things like Shraddha was mentioning just now, the whole vector search. There's a bunch of AI primitives that we need to double down on. AI functions, especially because this is kind of like very relevant to Presto, right? Like how do we get these various AI primitives into these engines, providing these value for our customers, providing scale, DevX, quality of life improvements, and this big adaptation to kind of like the change from our users coming from not just people, but from AI agents. That's going to be a big thing too. And so working through this transition is definitely kind of like a big bet and a big focus for us.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, we'll be keeping a close eye because, like I've mentioned, I feel like you're leading this, right? Like we're looking to see how Meta is solving these big problems. So keep us updated, Kaushik.
Yeah, it's 100%. But this is also a big community thing. I think
It
I
is,
love the engagement that we kind of like get from everybody. It is fantastic. We cannot do
definitely.
this alone. And so, yeah.
I would just like to add, this bringing AI functions to SQL is going to become super popular and useful.
Plus one, absolutely. Anson, how are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, same thing like Shraddha and like Kaushik is saying. I think agents are kind of the talk of the town these days, right? So we are thinking about how do we have to structure our data to feed these agents, right? To make sure that they have the underlying data architecture to take care of, a world of agentic AI, right? And how do we deal with all that? So, we are definitely building like the data architecture underneath. We definitely see more rise of things like vector databases underneath, right? That whole concept of being able to interact with dimensions and vectors, and that's kind of an underpinning of an AI world, right? Where you can work more with agents on that, and even as well, like just natural language talking, those agents talking with that data, right? Just being able to chat with those documents. And then I'll add one more thing. I think from my side, I see a lot of like the unstructured data side of stuff as well, right? Just being able, we're trying to retrieve information from that. So, that's kind of a new thing we're working on is retrieving unstructured data, just being able to, in a lot of cases, actually, the benefits of taking that unstructured data and even converting that to structured data, so that you can do stuff like SQL, you can have Presto act on that data. I mean, that's becoming valuable. We're starting to see benefits of some of that, right? So just playing around with some of that new type of capabilities with unstructured data, what that means when you combine it with structured data is, and how you can get agents to act on that data, right? Is the end goal of these days. I think just the optimal way of building your data architecture for this agentic AI is starting to surface as one of the most important points that I'm seeing.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Okay, I think we're kind of at time, so I'll just ask one more final question to wrap things up. I think a lot of people that are listening to this panel right now are probably maybe they're starting their journey, maybe they're in the middle, or they're figuring out how they're going to re-architect or maybe build a data platform to support AI. So all three of you have an amazing experience. If you could leave them with one piece of advice as they start this journey, what would it be? So Kaushik, I'll put you on the spot and have you start.
Yeah. AI is going to change a lot. I think, one of the things for me is definitely we need to completely rethink a lot of the things that we have. We need to kind of much more than before, we have to stop clinging to what we have, and really understand, listen to our customers, to kind of like what they need from these data platforms, rethink everything that we've grown accustomed to. Uh, I think that's the only thing that I
Great.
can think about now.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Anson, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think people jump into Gen AI very quickly, right? That's like the talk of the town, what people want to do. They want to do AI projects right away, but they don't think about data, right? And so you can't have Gen AI without data, right? You need data. And then I think secondary to that, you need data quality as well, right? So you need to make sure that you have good quality data that you're feeding your Gen AI applications. You just can't have Gen AI by itself. It just doesn't exist like that.
Agreed. You have to have the data. Shraddha, I'll have you end.
Yeah, so
your
plus
big-
one
yeah.
to, Kaushik and Anson, I feel that, like solving data is the hardest problem. Data is the foundation. So until and unless you have clean, reliable, secure data, right, you cannot build, your AI experiences will not add value. So my advice is, that build that strong foundation of data, with usable data, having semantic information built on a performant and open lakehouse architecture, and then building AI experiences breezy, easy.
Amazing. Data is everything. Data is the lifeblood. So I hope everybody can take that away. One of the big takeaways from today's panel. Thank you all so much. This was really an awesome conversation. Anson, Kaushik, Shraddha, really enjoyed having you, learning about how each one of you and your teams are thinking about data in this new world of AI. So really appreciate your insights and your time. I hope everybody gained something today and learned something. And this was a great panel. So thank you all. Appreciate it. I hope everybody has a great rest of PrestoCon Day. And Anson, Kaushik, Shraddha, again, thank you so much. Great conversation.
And thank you, Ali, for being an amazing host for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. Thanks, folks. Take care. We'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye-bye.